Hello, and welcome back to the 7th week of Consider This, the virtual series where we break down the science and public health behind COVID-19. I'm Marianne McDowell.
Hi, and I'm Heidi Beidinger, and we're co-hosting this new webinar series that we are focusing on the pandemic. And today our guests are Deborah Stanley, who's the director of Imani Unidad, and Sheriff Bill Redmond, who oversees our local county jail. We'll introduce them shortly, but just as a reminder, the reason that we put this webinar series together is for all of us to come together to learn more about the science and the public health of COVID-19.
So we hope you're finding the information useful and enjoying the series. I want to remind you that we post educational tutorials every week. If you haven't looked at those, you can look back at the previous shows to learn more. And each week, Heidi posts some information about the current data. And as always, you can email us at consider@nd.edu with any questions or comments. And as I remind you every week that we do bring in the experts to give you expert advice, but the views are ours and our guests and not the views or policies of the University of Notre Dame, unless they're explicitly stated as such. And the information we provided is not intended to serve as or be interpreted as specific medical advice or substitute for the advice of your own personal health practitioner.
That's a mouthful.
I know,
The disclosure is a mouthful. So last week we had a super interesting conversation about wastewater surveillance. So how do we use wastewater to identify COVID and possible outbreaks? And Kyle Bibby, who's a Notre Dame researcher, is working on that kind of strategy here at Notre Dame, and he joined us. But if you missed last week's show, don't worry, because we have it posted on our ThinkND website. So now here we are in week 7 of our series. We're more than halfway through. Let's introduce our guests. So cue the guests.
And oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yay.
Awesome. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, guests.
Oh.
We're so pleased to introduce our show's guests today. So let me just take a minute to tell everybody about your fabulousness. Deborah Stanley is the founder and executive director of Imani Unidad, which is a community-based organization focused on infusing social justice into social and behavioral health by providing prevention, education, and advocacy through community efforts with an intentional emphasis on the Black community. Deborah is an absolute gift to our community, given her commitment to improve the health of our community, but especially for those who are at greatest risk of slipping through the proverbial cracks. Sheriff William Redmond began his career in 1994 with the St. Joe County Police Department as a special deputy while working at the St. Joe County Jail. And in 1995, he was promoted to the rank of probationary patrolman and graduated from the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy in '95. And Bill began working as a patrol officer and soon after accepted the assignment to become a DARE officer in our community for our county. He had a successful and illustrious career as an officer and was elected to sheriff in 2018. And Bill brings a combination of law experience and community that offers a unique perspective and enthusiasm to ensure the health of those that he is in charge of. Thank you both very much for joining us this evening.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Happy to be here. Thank
In full disclosure, I have to acknowledge the relationship that I have with Deborah. Deborah and I have known each other from a distance for many, many years. Deborah and my mom were and are friends and were former colleagues many, many years ago. And so, Deborah, I have to poke and say that you haven't picked up those hostas yet from my house. You've got to come and pick those up. Come get them. And Bill, I've known you from a distance for a really long time. You were the DARE officer for my 3 now grown children. And there were many discussions at the dinner table about Officer Redmond coming in and telling them the do's and don'ts of alcohol and drugs. And I told them again that you were going to be on the show this evening. And of course, it stirred up all those old stories about, well, do you remember when? And he would bring in his props and he'd talk to us about this. And so I just thought that was a nice memory, and I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Lovely. And I haven't known either of you before this, but it's been a delight to meet and chat with both of you. And I'm really grateful that you decided to join us tonight to talk about vulnerable populations in our community and how COVID affects them. So at the beginning of each of our shows, Heidi and I like to get to know our guests a little bit better and have our audience get to know our guests. And so I'm hoping each of you can tell us your journey and how you got where you are and what it is you do and what you love about it, and a fun or silly fact about yourself. So Deborah, do you think you could start?
Yes, so I have, well, I was actually born in South Bend, but at the age of 10, my family relocated to Oakland, California, and that's where I grew up. And so after graduating from college, I did a stint at corporate America, and then I worked for the state of California, so I worked for the government. And so I came back home in 1988, and that's where I got into community. So my first job here was at a health clinic, and I was hired to address the social health needs of folks. You know, I'm not a medical person, but as they were beginning to look at people holistically, so if they had a medical issue, I was to address the accompanying social health issues. And then it was there that I got introduced to this whole other realm of social health issues, HIV and all of that. And so I became this whole advocate for educating the community as HIV was emerging in our community and nobody knew too much about it. And so because when I worked for the state government, I actually worked in a prison for 4 years. And at that prison, which was an adult prison, we saw sometimes 15, 16, 17-year-olds coming in there doing life without the possibility of parole. And these were actually children who had never, ever actually had a life. And so I left there with this kind of commitment within my soul that if I ever got a chance to do anything to try to prevent, allow them, create some sort of community where they could find their gifts and talents before life without the possibility of parole, I would do that. And so all of those things, the people needing just to learn more about themselves kind of brought me to where I am today. Yeah.
And your fun fact?
Oh, my fun fact is I have hair for the first time in 30 years. That's been a gift of COVID. You know, all the barbershops shut down, and so my hair began to grow. And actually, I kind of like it now. I went to an estate sale and I found one of those cake breakers that we used to use to comb our afros. And so I'm like back in the swing of things. So I'm committed to having this hair until this whole COVID thing is over.
That's awesome. Bill, are you going to comment about hair?
Yeah, I'll start with my fun fact is I have no hair. How's that? And the reason why is because I'll tell you, I was born and raised in the city of South Bend. My wife and I and our family moved to the city of Mishawaka, where we currently reside, about 15 years ago. But born and raised in St. Joe County, this is home for me and my family. Being a police officer is something I always wanted to do since I was a young boy. I look back and try to figure out what led me into that. And I really believe it was officers that used to visit the schools and talk to the kids about safety. And as luck would have it, that's kind of the path I chose also once I became a police officer, was teaching DARE to our local youth for over 18 years and spent a lot of time with our local youth. And so with that being said, I am more I'd like to be more proactive as sheriff and instead of reactive, and try to help people as much as I can. And I think that's the reason I'm where I'm at today. But as sheriff, I want to continue doing making good choices for our department and for the citizens of St. Joseph County, and try to make it as safe as possible. And then my actual true fun fact is a lot of people don't know is I played the violin in elementary school.
Oh, wow.
So it didn't last, but I did play the violin.
We knowing that, we might have asked you to bring it along.
I know, right? So a fun fact, I was born in South Bend as well, born and raised. All of my family is here. And I also, Deborah, worked in a jail setting for 8 years. I worked at Cook County Jail.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, another connection. I didn't know you had worked there. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing your origin story, as we like to call it too. So let's go into the next segment where this is called Rumor Has It. So these are the things that people are talking about in the community, and we don't know if they're true or not. And now that we have the experts here with us, now we get to ask these questions. So Bill, this first rumor is for you. We've heard that inmates at the jail will be first in line to receive the vaccine once it is available. Is this true or false?
Yeah, all my work looking into this and trying to keep up with the CDC and the facts and the science that's behind COVID-19, I have not seen anywhere where inmates have been listed in the first stage of receiving a vaccine. It appears to me, and from my investigating, it looks like that individuals with serious medical conditions and are at risk for severe COVID-19 illnesses, people over the age of 65, people that are in nursing homes would be the first individuals to potentially receive the vaccine once that is approved. And then they would go on to essential healthcare workers, and then non-essential healthcare workers, such as police officers and so on and so forth. But nowhere have I found where inmates would be in that first initial stage of receiving that vaccine.
So do they, though it seems like it's a pretty vulnerable population, not just the people who are incarcerated, but also your staff. And so is that like second in line, or I was just wondering if people are planning for that.
Yeah, it appears we're in the second stage of the potential vaccine. So we would, it is a very vulnerable situation with the inmates that are housed in the jail. They're in close contact with one another. So, we have feared an outbreak in the jail from day one. And I will tell you, our jail staff and our medical staff that are there 24/7 have done an outstanding job to help keep that under control. Up until recent, our numbers have been relatively low. We had a little spike this past week inside the jail with staff members as well as inmates. But we feel as though, even though we had that outbreak, we feel safe that it's contained to certain areas of the jail and it's not widespread through the entire jail.
That's good.
I have a follow-up question to that. For people who are inmates, like, can you require them to take a vaccine? So, or is it by choice?
I think it would still be by choice. We would give everybody that option, obviously, but we would make sure we documented the fact that they accepted the vaccine or declined the vaccine. And then the way I understand it is the vaccine is going to be in 2 stages. So that also would make it a little more difficult. So if an inmate is in our jail at the time of that first vaccination, and then they're released or moved to another facility, we have to make sure, somehow try to track that and make sure that they get that second dose, which could be difficult, especially if you release somebody from jail into general population back into the public. Who knows if they would follow through with that second vaccine. So there's a lot of concerns there to make sure that people that want to receive the vaccine do in fact get it.
Right.
Well, just as a side note, the good news is the first Pfizer said that they have really good efficacy results. Now Moderna, and those both take 2 doses. But
Yep.
there's some other vaccine trials out there where it's only a single dose. And so maybe when it all comes, they'll just decide, people who are incarcerated, they'll get the one with the 1 dose, where other people might get 2 doses. We'll have
Yeah.
to see
And that for me, the position I'm in as sheriff, that's what's really scary about this COVID-19 is so many unknowns. And you hear on the news that, this group has a vaccine potentially, which would be 2 doses. Another vaccine would be only 1 dose. So it's really confusing, I think, for the general public as well as it is to me personally. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but it's been difficult to try to keep track of everything since the beginning.
Absolutely. And I know we're going to talk a whole lot more about what's happening inside of the jail too, but I know that we had a second rumor, and Deborah, you had mentioned something about a rumor that you heard about vitamin C.
Yes. I was in the shoe store the other day, and there was a lady who went and preceded me. And as she was going in, I was waiting for her to pull out her mask and put it on, which was just something that never happened. And so when I went inside, I stayed way in the back, obviously wanting her to know that I was distancing myself from her. And as she was at the counter, she kept looking around at me. And right before she left, after she had conducted her business, she pulled these flyers out of her bag to give to the proprietor of the store, and explaining to him that she wanted to share this information of how to prevent COVID. And across the top, there was this big, in bold letters, vitamin C. And so those rumors persist from people who believe that they have the cure or the preventative, when, again, when we listen to the scientists, when we listen to the doctors, none of them has said. And for those of us who understand viruses, retroviruses, the ability of viruses to mutate, the fact that for most viruses, the common cold, HIV, other things, there is no medical or biological cure, and as Chief Redmond said, there's still all of this that we do not know. And so when people believe that they know, and they don't have to take any kind of precautions, it's not only just rumors, it's scary as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. There is some science that talks about, vitamin C and how it can boost your immune system, but you're right, it doesn't prevent infection at all.
Right.
And even those boosting studies are questionable. One thing they are saying that won't prevent infection for sure, but is for everyone to make sure their vitamin D levels are up. And you don't want to take too much vitamin D, that's bad as well. But especially in our area where it's so cloudy, there's a lot of vitamin D deficient people. And so that's an important thing for the infection as well.
Right.
But it is amazing, though, how somebody will walk into an establishment and promote a myth or a falsehood knowingly and unchecked, and this is how it starts, right? So this is exactly why we decided to do a webinar such as this, so that we could uncover these kinds of things and talk about the science and the public health of COVID. So this is awesome. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. So let's talk a minute now about the data. And I feel like I feel like a broken record, because every week I say, oh my gosh, the data is worse than it was last week, and it truly is. And now we're just seeing this exponential growth with COVID. As I reviewed the data, the state set a one-day record on Saturday with 8,451 cases in one day. In the last 24 hours, state officials had conducted 53,776 tests, with a 7-day positivity rate of 11.3%.
Wow.
That means that over 1 in 10 people who are taking the test are positive.
Mhm.
I mean, this is so significant. And then, of course, we also know from St. Joe County Department of Health that persons of color are disproportionately bearing the burden of the COVID infection and death. And so, Deborah, I was just wondering, could you tell us a little bit about how COVID is affecting the community you serve, or maybe even back up a moment and tell us more about the community that your organization serves and how COVID is affecting your community?
Okay, so first, this whole disparate number, if
Yeah.
we look across the board at every health issue, it says the very same thing, that the Black and brown communities are disproportionately affected. And again, there's a number of reasons for that. So this is just another health issue as far as we're concerned. And so the people that I work with, we are seeing them become infected, living in fear, number one, and then becoming infected. Now, interestingly, when this first started and we went into lockdown mode and all the businesses were closing, we became very afraid for our constituency, which are recently released folks from incarceration, people with prior substance misuse issues, people living with HIV. And so we figured last hired, first fired. That was our initial reaction. And so we were all ready to help to support them, financially, with emotional support, whatever was necessary. But lo and behold, they weren't losing their jobs. They were working in the factories, they were service workers, but then they started coming in afraid because they were looking around, like say in a factory setting, and seeing people disappear. And no one was saying anything about why that person who was working beside them yesterday was no longer there. They weren't being provided any kind of protections. And then they were hearing all these news reports, and so they became fearful. And so we got a lot of people coming in to our offices afraid. When we realized how severe the issue was, we didn't actually shut our doors entirely. We locked them and we could only see people individually. We had to hire a couple of extra people to clean after every person who came in, sanitize the place. And because we provide mental health services, we have therapeutic care, it became really hard for us as well as those we serve, because we do a lot of hugging and kissing around here, and so that whole disconnect, for people who really need to be affirmed, who need to, when we're talking about, I learned this working with people with HIV, human touch is so important to all of us staying healthy, key to our immune system staying strong. So then to come to this place where we can't touch one another, we have to stay distanced. And then for those of us who work here, some of us are caring for elderly parents. Some of us just have fragile family members at home. And so then there was some fears that were arising in us. Because as committed and as dedicated as we are, family first always. And so what do we need to do? And so we take all of the precautions, but all of us have had to take some time off just to rejuvenate our own mental wellness. Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, the work you do is amazing.
I know.
We really appreciate.
Yeah, I hear, in the beginning when you were talking about that culture of silence that was happening in
Yes.
the workplaces, people
Yes.
disappearing and not being told information, not being given masks and everything. It's so disturbing to hear. And yet that's again why we have this show, because we want to air those things. Those are real things. Those are real things happening in our community. And we shouldn't be just brushing that underneath the rug or anything like that. So thank you for sharing that. So Marianne, I think we go to headlines.
Yeah, it's time for the headlines, and there's certainly lots and lots to choose from. And I chose a couple that I thought were relevant for today's conversation. One was from yesterday in the New York Times. The US passes 11 million cases, with Black and Latino Americans hit disproportionately. And there was a viewpoint in today's South Bend Tribune mentioning the same thing. And actually, I was at a national meeting today, and Tony Fauci talked, and he presented on the same topic. So it's pretty important. And the rates are astounding. So those that are hospitalized, those people of color, are more likely to be hospitalized and die 4 times more than whites. And for there's multiple reasons we think why that's happening. Partly is just their higher rates of infection. But the second headline came a couple weeks ago from the South Bend Tribune. Coronavirus safety improvements on track at St. Joseph County Jail. So this is an article about COVID-related renovations at the jail, and I thought, Bill, you could tell us a little bit about what's happening there and how it was funded.
Yeah, absolutely. As most people know, or you've heard the term CARES Act on several occasions, I'm sure, throughout this process of COVID-19. And so we were made known here locally in St. Joe County that we were given nearly $8 million. I think it was like $7.8 million was awarded to St. Joe County specifically to utilize for COVID reasons, whatever you could come up with, testing supplies, medical, PPE, things of that nature. So we, of course, me and my staff jumped on that immediately. We started requesting PPE for our jail, for the staff as well as the inmates. And then as we progressed some time forward, I started thinking about a little bit bigger projects of what we could do potentially in the jail to make it safer for everybody. Because as sheriff, I just don't think about how to keep our staff safe, which is really important to me, both in the jail and outside of the jail. But it's my responsibility to keep the inmates safe as well. And so I take that very seriously. And we have a full-time medical staff, as I mentioned earlier, that work around the clock. And I can't thank them enough for everything they have done to help keep themselves safe, as well as our inmates and our staff. And then our correctional staff that's there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to maintain safety and security of the jail. So I started thinking a little bit more. The jail is coming up on its 20th anniversary. So it's been around for a while. I know it's hard to believe for people that have lived here in the community, even for myself as sheriff, being on the police department for 26 years. It's hard to believe that jail is almost 20 years old already. But what I did is we started thinking about different ways that we could ensure the safety of the jail and maybe use some of the CARES Act money to do some projects inside. So we started off in the lobby of the jail. If anybody's ever been in the jail, it's kind of an open concept area. So we enclosed that area, putting a layer of glass up around the jail staff, making it safer for the jail staff as well as the general public coming into the facility to get reports or, file reports or whatever. We purchased 2 UV emitters. They're machines that we can place throughout the jail that helps kill bacteria and viruses. They're extremely expensive. They're about $40,000 a piece, but we utilized CARES Act money to purchase 2 of those to strategically place throughout the jail and continuously clean the jail on a day-to-day basis. So not only do the cleaning staff and our corrections officer keep the jail safe and clean, we utilize those UV emitters. And then the larger project that I submitted to the commissioners and was approved was major renovations in our visitation area. We have people visiting our jail every day, whether it's family members, attorneys, different members of the social services organizations here locally, mental health professionals from Oak Lawn, doctors who are coming into the facility to do mental health evaluations. So we wanted to update our visitation area to make it safer for the staff as well as guests that are coming into the facility. And then one of the big things that we did, we started actually last year, well over a year ago prior to COVID, was started video court. So instead of transporting inmates from our jail every single day to the courthouse, we were able to work it out with 2 of the 4 Superior Court judges to do video court. So instead of transporting people physically every single day to back and forth to court and to the jail, we started utilizing our video courtrooms more. And that was a goal of mine and my staff. And now because of COVID, the judges are utilizing video court even more. So as part of this renovation, we're going to add 2 more courtrooms inside the jail. So instead of 2, we'll have 4 courtrooms, which will make it a lot safer. Anytime we take somebody out of the jail, it makes it dangerous, not only for the inmate, but for the staff, the judges, the courtroom staff. So this will ensure it being safer. We're upgrading a couple of our training rooms to make it COVID safe. So people, when they come to training, they'll be distanced from each other, trying to keep that 6 feet distance, getting new furniture instead of, it's little things like leather furniture or plastic furniture instead of cloth to make it easier to clean and maintain and keep it safer for people. So it's little things like that. And then another major project that's going on is to our HVAC, our air conditioning and heating units. We have what is called reverse airflow. So in certain parts of the jail and certain parts of the medical facility, and we're going to add to that now with this renovation, it helps to keep the airflow, the negative airflow that may be inside the jail, it keeps it separated. So it helps keep the airflow safer and more fresh air in those particular areas. So we're going to do some major upgrades to the HVAC units. So we're going to be probably close to about $2.5 million upgrades to the jail with everything I just mentioned. But that again is coming from the CARES Act funds that were allotted to the St. Joseph County.
And when is that expected to be completed?
It's amazing. I submitted that just a couple months ago, and it's not a normal process to get things done this quick, but the CARES Act money had to be spent by December 31st. So all of these projects I just mentioned will be done prior to the end of the year. So it's truly amazing to be able to pull off. And I know, I think it was Commissioner Costoni actually commended everybody that's been involved in this project to get the things done as quickly as we did. And I can't thank everybody enough myself.
No, just in time for the winter months. So that's good.
Playing off of or adding on to what Bill is talking about in terms of like technology and what they're doing to their facility. Deborah, how have you, so I know that you already mentioned this, you provide mental health services and those things are usually, in person, and you mentioned the hugs and the kisses and that sort of thing, right? The affection and so forth. So obviously that's COVID has impacted your ability to do that. Are you guys making structural changes or adding technology? What are you guys doing to minimize losing that connection to your community?
So we aren't really adding that much. Well, we haven't thus far added technology. I'll put it that way. So we're limiting the number of people who can be in the facility at a time, so that's the one thing. We have restarted our group, and it's limited, and it's in another space that has the technology that we can now zoom in those who at home on house arrest, on ankle monitors, and not allowed to leave home, as well as students who want to join. So we'll be able to by next month be able to do that for folks. Yep. Yes. So and oh, I was just gonna say it is an adjustment, you know, trying to get us used to the Zoom meetings and make them personable, and be able to make that connection, that human connection, in spite of. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard on Zoom. I think we're gonna evolve as a species or something. But I guess what I wanted to know is everyone, all the people that you serve, do they have access to computers, tablets, or does everybody have a phone that they can Zoom in on, or is that sometimes an issue?
Everybody has a phone these days. I haven't found anybody who doesn't have a phone. Now, whether the capacity of the phones is another thing. I mean, in group one night, we had to stop and have that conversation about relationships, human relationships, human connectedness, because the people were like really into their phones. That had become the new relationship. And so we had to have a whole group meeting one night about the phones. But now it's kind of going back and putting them in their appropriate place, because now we have a use for them as a means of staying connected to one another. Yes.
Yeah, I saw a movie once. I think it was called Her or She. It was about this guy who fell in love with Siri on his phone.
Oh.
I'll go with another question. Bill, I remember hearing back in April about decarceration at the jail. And then I had learned that the jail usually had a population around 600, but that you were actually in a relatively short amount of time were able to reduce the population to around 400. And I was wondering what the jail census is now, but also more importantly, how did you accomplish this?
Yeah, we are currently have been averaging the last month and a half, probably about 520, 530 inmates in our facility. That's still considerably low for this time of the year. Usually spring, summer, the numbers tend to go up. We could be as high as 600, 700 people. Early when the COVID first started, we were in the 600s. We were able to get all the way down to about 400 inmates. So we were fortunate to get about 200 inmates out of our facility, and that was a lot of work. Troy Warner is our legal advisor. He's got a great relationship with our local judges. We work well with the prosecutor's office, and those are decisions that come from the judges and the prosecutor. I, as sheriff, and we as the county police department don't determine who's in our facility, who stays, who goes. That's beyond our responsibility. So the judges and the prosecutor's office work together to go through the list of people that were currently housed at our jail, and they were able to determine people that did not have violent tendencies, maybe misdemeanor crimes where people were being housed at our facility, and so they were able to release multiple people from our facility. Now, the reason that was important for us on our side with our jail staff and the medical staff is if we had an outbreak in the jail, we would have been able to separate people a lot easier. So that was important for us to be prepared for an outbreak. Because again, with all of the unknowns, we didn't know what was going to happen, who was going to be affected, how people were going to be affected because of that unknown that we've mentioned here tonight. So we wanted to at least be prepared in case there were an outbreak within the jail. We would be able to separate people, quarantine individuals. And so that's worked out really well. As I mentioned earlier, we have done a great job since the beginning. We had a spike last week in our facility that's concerned us just a little bit. So we again have reached out to our local judges and who will be working with the prosecutor to determine if any people that are in our jail could potentially be released. post bond, whatever they have to do to get out. So that way we can keep our population as low as possible, but without jeopardizing the safety and security of our community. That is, we've all agreed that we will not do that. We will do whatever we can to make sure that our community stays safe. Obviously, that's all of our goals. But it has affected the courts with jury trials. Our local judges have to wait for rulings from the Indiana Supreme Court on whether they were to stop all jury trials, whether they can continue with them. And so I know Judge Hurley has been working with Troy Warner and the other judges and judicial staff to make those determinations for us.
So do you think that we're going to, so when we get beyond COVID, do you think that we're going to continue to work to incarcerate people so that we have fewer folks in jail?
Absolutely.
Where do you see, talk just a little bit about where you see this going.
Yeah, absolutely. I made that commitment early on as sheriff. I don't want people in our jail. So
Right.
I will do whatever I can to help people, job placement, education, whatever we can do. Instead of just, my goal as sheriff is when we walk somebody out of jail to release them to the general public, is that we have a plan for them. We have somebody there that's going to help hopefully get them housing, have a job set up, whatever we can do to prevent that person to come back into our jail. I am a strong believer in that, and we have been committed to that. We've been working that direction. COVID has obviously slowed some of our plans down. Have inmates that are what we consider level 6s who have been, instead of being sentenced to the Department of Corrections, they are now housed at local jails. So there's something going on in all 92 counties in the state. But what I would like to do is help educate those people that are here with GED programs, second chance opportunities, so that way we can prepare them upon release to do good things in the community and help themselves succeed once they're released. So I am committed to doing whatever I can as sheriff to help people and try to prevent them from coming back to our facility.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Could I just follow up with Deborah? I mean, your group, you work with recently released individuals. And can you tell us a little bit, is COVID-19 affecting their transition back to the community more than it would be normally? Is it causing more issues?
No, so some of them, because we work a lot with community corrections, and the same thing, they are being released back to the community to decrease the population that's inside, and clustered, but they are being restricted. They are on ankle monitors and being restricted to their homes. If they don't have a job, if they don't have a doctor's appointment, they are being limited. One of the things that we have been trying to do, even when the folks that we work with, when they have court cases and all of that, we have written letters and we have tried to get the court systems to turn people over to us and let us as a community wrap our arms around them and try to keep them together and in community, because that's where we need people, in community, other than, as Sheriff Redmond was saying, those who perpetrate violent acts against other human beings. There is a need to separate them, but for those just struggling with a lot of social and behavioral health issues, they can be kept in community. There's a lot of community supports to go along with that, so yeah, we would like to be more involved and engaged, because that's what we do. And so when we talk about like the Black and Brown community, because there's this question about the health disparities. when we look at the stressors, because again, stress is probably the #1 precursor to things like diabetes and hypertension, which is what a lot of people die of these, because they have these other pre-existing conditions that weaken their systems overall. And so when we think about the stress of the racism and the socioeconomic stressors, wondering, am I going to be able to feed my children tomorrow? Wondering what's going on with my children because I'm having to work 3 jobs, those kinds of things. Even if we look, I think things that we talk about, if you look at even this administration being, and how many of them have their inner circle, from Father Jenkins, to the president, his whole family, all of them. The only person who died was Herman Cain, the Black man.
Yeah.
That's really,
Everybody else is Chris Christie with all his pre-existing health issues, and he's able to talk about it today, how hard it was for him, but he came back, So there is those other things that we have to live with day to day. If we have a Black male child, is he gonna come home tonight from work? All of those kinds of stressors add to our poor health conditions.
yeah. And I don't, you were going to say something, Heidi, but I was thinking we need to go to questions here pretty soon.
We do, but I appreciate Deborah's comment in articulating the difference between the folks who are incarcerated because of social behavioral issues and not because they're violent offenders.
Right.
And I know I've had that conversation with Sheriff Redmond before, that he says that many people get incarcerated because of mental health problems, not because they're a violent offender. And I think it's just so important that, that you guys have made that distinction, because I think that's something on the outside in the general community that we don't properly understand this. We think that people go to jail because they deserve to go to jail, right?
Okay.
I know that sounds really simplistic, but I think that that's what most people believe. You deserve to go to jail. They don't understand this distinction. And I didn't have that understanding until I started working in a jail. I didn't,
Yeah,
so I think it's just really, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, mental health is definitely an issue, not only here locally, but throughout the state. I've been to several meetings with the other sheriffs throughout Indiana, and it's a huge concern for all of us statewide. It goes beyond that, but we have people, and we see it every day, who end up in our facility because of mental health issues versus committing a crime or doing something wrong. They may have committed a crime to end up in our jail, but it was because the issue with mental health more so than actually physically committing a crime. So we need to really work on that as a community to try to help people and keep those individuals out of our jail and get them the mental health that they need.
So actually, one of the questions that we received, the mental health question point is why I chose this, and then asking about what's happening to the homeless populations in our community with COVID-19. And oftentimes homeless individuals have mental health problems as well.
Absolutely. When I was running for sheriff, I got asked the question one day, and I thought I was pretty well rehearsed on law enforcement questions and things like that. And I got asked one time at a forum, what are you going to do about the homeless population? And I actually froze, as sheriff, because I didn't think about that. And is that really a sheriff's responsibility? And in reality, it's all of our responsibility to help the homeless population. So I know that recently there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of concerns with our local homeless population. I know the county, some county officials stepped up and again are using some of the CARES Act money to house these individuals at local hotels. So we're at least working on some temporary solutions. It's not a long-term solution, but we're at least getting some people off the street, which is going to be helpful. The concern with the homeless population is not only the mental health that was mentioned, but they're vulnerable to drugs and alcohol. And oftentimes those individuals are targeted by drug dealers and people that are trying to take advantage of them financially by selling drugs and those things to those individuals. So from a law enforcement standpoint, we want to help the homeless population, but we also have to be concerned with their welfare at these facilities that they're staying at.
Well, and I think that one of those facilities is one of those hotels is in my neighborhood, and it certainly isn't like, 5-star hotel where they're putting these people for sure. So thank you. So I'm going to follow up with some other questions. One we received from Lacey Airhern, and she said, Deborah, love the hair.
Oh.
But she said, I'm struck by the statement that COVID-19 is just another health issue for the Black and Brown community because the disparities in health issues are so many. Is there any way that health systems and other health actors can build on or maybe piggyback on services focusing on COVID-19 to improve other health disparities? And I don't know what you guys think about that. Are those opportunities like taking advantage of CARES Act money or other services that are being offered? Do you think that's something that you could do with your populations, or is it that too difficult?
So, one of the things that strikes me, so a lady came into our office the other day. She is living with cancer and she is going through treatments. And so she's no longer working, and she was needing help paying her rent. And she's been to, the current facilities that help people pay their rent. She came by here saying that everybody's only helping people displaced, disaffected by COVID. Therein lies some of the issue, that when issues grow, there is not a growth in resources. It's a redirection of. So the pot never gets bigger. It stays the same size. And so things are redirected. So I wonder what could we learn from this? I know in the beginning, we helped a lot of people. Most of the people that we helped with rent and utilities were people who had always worked, and they were now either working from home or just furloughed from their jobs. And it was a new experience for them. They had never been unemployed before. And so when we start thinking about another health issue, it is what have we learned from all of these health issues, the disparities, and how can we close these gaps? That's where the focus needs to be. But there is so much change that needs to happen within these institutions and structures. It's just like a lot of Black and brown people, what we've heard is they've gone to the hospital, they've gone to the doctor and been told just to go back home. Just go back home and isolate yourself. Just go back home. Well, I have to go back home to my family. I'd like to be tested. I'd like to know if this is going to get worse. The need for Black and brown people to be listened to be heard, to be believed when they present with their issues. That's another problem. And so, yeah, there is some structural, institutional kinds of things that need to change in regards to health, period. One of the things we're talking about harm reduction in our community. And why are people who are non-health care providers who don't have the expert, why are they allowed to make health related decisions like politicians?
Yeah, we get lots of questions talking about that.
Yes. So again, how can we ever approve those things you know, when the people who are making the decisions are not the appropriate people to make them, you know, and I think we've become more aware of that in recent days with this whole COVID this year, how health concerns can be politicized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure. Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest lessons that we're still struggling with, I think, in our divided.
Right. Right. And if I'm somebody who's undocumented, am I going to go to the doctor? You know, because now the greater fear is now I'm going to be separated from my family, you know.
Yeah.
And in these times where we've seen parents taken, deported, and children left alone, you know, in right here in this community. So
Yeah, I agree. So we're coming to the end of our time, but I want to just take one more quick question before we do our lightning round. And this one's from John Tambari. And he asks, will the sheriff consider splitting up the inmate population into two groups after the vaccinations come out? Those who have been vaccinated and those who refuse vaccinations. Food for thought, anyway.
Yeah, that's something we certainly look into. That'll be a whole nother topic once we get them to that, and how we're going to distribute the vaccination in a jail population. So there's going to be a lot of thought to that. I certainly am not a medical expert, so I will look for advice from the CDC, from our medical staff at the jail, from the doctors here locally, and take their advice on how we should handle those procedures. Because like I said, I'm certainly not a medical professional by any means.
Well, before we start our lightning round, I do want to say, you're saying you're not a health professional, but you know, when we started this series where we talk about physicians and the CDC and all these, you know, scientists, but it's amazing to me that both of you are really important health practitioners in our community. And so health just isn't who is giving the injection or taking the blood. I think what you guys offer to our community makes for a much healthier place than some of the rest of us at the lab.
Okay.
So I guess we should start with our lightning round.
Yes, I will go with the first question. Oh, so the lightning round are just fun questions so that we get to know you just a little bit better. So I'll go first. Deborah, what is your superpower?
Oh, my brain. I'm in love with my brain.
The neuroscience people would love that. Absolutely love that. Bill, what is your superpower?
I would say endurance, because I'm kind of like the Energizer Bunny. I don't like to stop. It drives me easy because we're go, go, go. I got everybody moving.
Awesome. Excellent. Okay. Bill, what was the last show you binged and loved?
Cobra Kai.
Cobra. I don't even know that.
I don't either.
It's a spinoff from the Karate Kid.
Oh,
okay.
Right. Yeah.
How about you, Deborah?
Oh, somebody finally convinced me that I should watch some television. So I did the whole Blackish thing. I started Blackish.
Yeah.
Pretty good one.
Deborah, what is your most treasured possession?
I have a bracelet that my husband gave me as my something new when we got married that I lost in the car, and it almost got vacuumed up at the car wash. Then I lost it on the street in Oakland, California, and somebody found it and it came back to me. And so I then got a new clasp put on it, but that bracelet was meant to be with me.
That's awesome. Bill, how about you?
I would say I actually have a watch that was passed down from my grandfather to my dad. It was a service watch that he received from his years of service at a factory in Elkhart. So that's one of my prized possessions.
Oh,
That's so nice.
those are both wonderful stories. I love that.
So Bill, this will be the last one. What are you deeply grateful for right now?
Currently, for my health and the health of my family and my entire family.
And Deborah, how about you?
That has to be mine too. 66 and no adverse health conditions.
Awesome.
Yes.
So thank you both so much for joining us. I think it's been a fabulous conversation, and thank you so much for what you do in the community. So that brings us to the end of our session, and I just want to encourage our audience to share what you learned today with your friends and family. If you have any comments or other future questions, please email us at consider@nd.edu. And I hope you turn in next week when we will be discussing COVID testing on the Notre Dame campus and the University of Illinois.
Okay.
Consider this: the more you know, the more good you can do.
So be informed and act on accurate information.
And share reliable information with others.
Until next week, be kind and give grace to each other. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.